On today's Technobabble, what's a DA?
This is Tech No Babble, your weekly source for church video and graphics news, perspectives, tips, and tricks. And now here's your host, Paul Clifford.
Hi everyone, this is Paul Allen Clifford and I'm your host. This is the show for church tech using video and graphic design in your church to get the message of hope and freedom that's found in Christ out. My name is Paul Allen Clifford and I've been doing this show since, I want to say 2006. So I've taken a hiatus from time to time, but we're still going, and I'd love for you to join the conversation. So head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact. Leave a comment below the video. That's perfectly okay. If you're listening to the audio, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. Hit me up on Twitter, Paul Allen Cliff, PaulAlanclif. A DA is a distribution amplifier. Now, you don't need to know what that means, but you might think distribution, that means sending something out. Amplifier means making a signal greater. So what a distribution amplifier does is it amplifies and then splits the signal. And that's very important that it's in that order, because what you get on the other end is the same strength signal of what comes in. So let me give you an example. I just got this from Kramer. If you haven't read about this, I'll leave a link to the blog post about this because this was just a delightful thing. This is an HDMI DA. Now you might be thinking, Paul, you don't like HDMI. That's correct. I do not like HDMI. But for some uses in short cable runs, and by short I mean like a meter, about a yard, something like that, maybe two, it's okay. But when you get into production level stuff where you're running the signal maybe 100 feet or about 30 meters ish, that's where things get a little iffy. So I don't use that in those situations. HDSDI is actually a better signal format, but this is an HDMI DA, and you'll notice if you're looking at the video that the camera's not wanting to focus on it, but basically we have two HDMI outs right here. Let's see here, right there and right there. And also an HDMI in over here. So basically it goes in one, amplifies the signal, splits it, and sends the same strength signal out these two ports. So you might be thinking, well, how's that different from a splitter? Well, some people, when they say splitter, they mean DA, and other people mean splitter. A splitter does no amplification whatsoever. It just splits. Now, it might need to do some electronic work to split the signal, but that's what it does, is it splits. For example, I've told you that it amplifies and splits, but this particular DA, which is a VM-2HXL, also has an EDID setup button, and that allows the handshake to go from either output number, from the input to the output number 1 and back, from the input to output number 2 and back, or from the input to outputs 1 and 2 and back. So it has some smarts in here that this little button allows you to configure. So there's certain situations where you actually want to get the EDID handshake kind of signal, because HDMI requires a two-way signal. You need to get that from a local monitor, for example, as opposed to a projector. Maybe the projector is far enough out that you can get the signal one direction, but it's a little iffy coming the other direction. So this DA has that as an additional ability. And I've also already just talked about the advantage of using a DA. Sometimes I run into people that say, oh yeah, no problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it to the first projector and then loop the signal out to the second projector. Sometimes that's fine, but a projector doesn't necessarily have a built-in DA. Sometimes it just loops the signal out and you get some degradation in signal strength. I was talking to someone online and he said that he was using a Mac Mini and wanted to come out the Thunderbolt port or mini display port. In this case, either one would do. They look the same, but they're different depending on the age of the Mac Mini. And he wanted to come out and send that to both a local monitor so that he could see up and close what was projecting on the screen, and then send that out to the projector. And people had different recommendations of a good way to do this, but I suggested that a DA like this one is a good way to do it as well. And part of that is because monitors don't tend to have loop outs. And while the projector did, and he could technically run a cable all the way to the projector and then run a cable all the way back to the monitor, that's a whole lot of cable, and there's a lot of potential failures that can happen if you do that. So I think this is a better solution to use a DA. But it's not the case that all DAs are just 1 in, 2 out. Some are 1 in, 4 out. So let's think about a possible situation where a 1 in, 4 out DA actually helps you. Imagine that you have your source signal, maybe it's from a switch or maybe it's from a computer, doesn't matter. And that goes into the DA and then comes out to a local monitor, out to projector 1, out to projector 2, and maybe out to a stage display or out to the lobby. So that's a good way to do it as well. Now, maybe you've got a mess of lobby TVs. Maybe you've got, let's say you have 4 of them. There's no reason, I mean, eventually this will break down, but I wouldn't feel bad at all about sending that one of those signals that was going to a lobby to yet another DA. And let's say a 1 in, 4 out again, and sending that again to all 4 of the lobby TVs. So that would work in situations where just using a splitter, not so much. And it could be that when someone says splitter, they mean DA, but I think it's really important to use the right terminology, because you can sometimes find a 1 to 2 splitter very inexpensively, like $20 or $30, whereas a 1 to 2 DA is a good one is going to run you around $100. Kramer has just, they're courting me. They're trying to get me to love them, and they're doing a great job. First off, I've used their stuff in the past and was impressed with their quality. But secondly, well, I'll just leave a link to the blog post of what they did when I won a Twitter contest from them. Here's a hint. It's in my hand. So that is kind of the advantage of using a DA over a splitter. It's more expensive, but I think that you're going to find that it's really, really worth it. And I think that you're going to find that anytime you need to send one signal to multiple places, this is the better way to do it. I should say, as an aside, that sometimes, depending on the DA, especially with analog DAs like a VGA DA, how's that for alphabet soup? VGA DA. So with an analog DA like a VGA DA, sometimes you'll even get a stronger signal on the output end. So when I was on staff at a church back in 2001, I believe, maybe it was 2002. In 2001 or 2002, I was on staff at a church, and when I found that I got, they had a DA in their signal flow, but the second out wasn't going anywhere. Well, as it turns out, they just needed a little amplification to get it the distance that it was going, and having the DA in line amplified the signal just enough to where they got a better signal. So that's something that I want to suggest to you as well, is sometimes just throwing a DA in line will actually give you, especially with an analog signal like a VGA signal, it will get you a better result. Now, remember, the downsides to these things are they tend to be more expensive than just splitters. And they do require power, so don't just stick them somewhere in the middle of the ceiling where you have no access to power. But think about it this way. You can, if you have a place, let's say your secondary projector is kind of iffy sometimes. If you have power up there where the first projector is, instead of using the loop out, you could throw a DA there, plug that into power, same power that powers the projector, and take your source signal directly from the source over the balun or over the long cable run, whichever you're using, and split it there because it's amplified and then split. Run it to the first projector. You should get the same quality of signal. And then the second projector, now instead of having the loop out signal, has the same strength of signal that the primary projector has, or the first projector in the line had. So that's another way to do it. You could also have two distinct cable runs from your source to the projectors, and that gives you a couple of options as well, because you could add a matrix switcher in later, and at that time maybe the DA'd source is one possible source, but you could also have another source, so you could switch up what's on these individual projectors. So maybe you had a triple head to go or a dual head to go, or maybe you've got some other source that's that same resolution that you could use the matrix switcher to switch out later, or maybe even use auxes from a video switcher. So the possibilities are endless, and this is a little piece of equipment, which, by the way, they make in VGA, DVI, SDI, HDSDI, or HDMI. So they make them in all the signals that you're likely to use, heck, even composite and S-video. They make them in all those different types of signals, so you can use the appropriate one for your system, and anytime you need to split, no problem. You can get a good quality signal even a couple of splits in. So I hope that that helps you. I hope that it's on the list of things that you may have always been curious about. So anytime someone talks about a DA in audio-video parlance, we're not talking about a district attorney. We're talking about a distribution amplifier. I hope that helps you as you're creating your system. I hope it helps you as you're trying to figure out, now how can I get this to 2 places when I've only got 1 output? And I hope it helps you and your church go out and change eternity. Don't forget to like, thumbs up, comment, etc. this video. The best way that you can help, other than buying training or my resources, is to share this with a friend. Every time that you share this and someone else subscribes, it helps us rise in the ranking and get the information out there. And it helps me go out and change eternity. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.